Hot. Bring the heat.
And now, your host, Pat Rouleau.
You're listening to Speak Up and Stay Alive, Patient Safety Radio, and I am your hostess, Pat Rouleau. If you've listened to this show before, you know of my concern about the health hazards associated with smart meters. Well, today I have a special guest here to give us some additional information and updates. He is Josh Hart, and he is the director of Stop Smart Meters. He has worked in the energy industry as a transportation planner, environmental advocate, and a freelance journalist. His writing has appeared in Surveyor, Walk and Make magazines, The Wall Street Journal, and others. He's been interviewed on PBS NewsHour and countless other TV and radio stations. He has been the director of the California-based Stop Smart Meters for nearly 4 years, fighting the forced deployment of smart meters in the United States and abroad. And you can find him and his excellent website, stopsmartmeters.org. So much to know, Josh, so I welcome you to the show.
Thanks so much for having me on, Pat.
Oh, it is our pleasure. I get so many requests, phone calls, letters, emails from folks wanting to know what they can do about this. Now, I know you're in California. A lot of my listeners are in Ohio, but we do have listeners throughout the country. So hopefully this information will be generic enough that we can apply it towards our own situation. So most of our listeners know about smart meters because I talk about the health effects quite often. But just in case we have some first timers, tell us what a smart meter is and why everyone should take issue with it.
Well, a smart meter is any electronic meter that replaces our older traditional analog meters, and smart meters can be for gas, water, or electricity. And utilities are deploying these around the country with very little warning and without asking permission of homeowners or renters, for that matter. And many people coming home to find a new digital smart meter on their homes. And since 2009, when these kind of meters began being deployed in California, there's been a grassroots rebellion against them, and for very good reason. First of all, they tend to charge more to the customer for the same amount of utilities that are used, and there's other privacy issues related to the utilities being able to find out detailed information about what you do in your home based on your utility usage, and combining that with other internet and phone sources of data to compile a profile on you. This is often shared with the NSA or FBI or law enforcement or third-party corporations. And there's also one issue that has been brought to the forefront in recent months is the fire issue. And the fact is that these smart meters are novel devices. They're electronic devices with circuit boards that all of the current, the electric ones, are all the current for the house goes through that. And because the utilities have been trying to cut corners and not use electricians and other professionals to swap out the meters, they've been using temp workers who don't really know what they're doing. And as a result, many of the meters have been installed incorrectly. And so there have been arcing type fires. There are fires associated with the electronics and the fact that they're plastic and can melt. Just recently, the Canadian province of Saskatchewan recalled more than 100,000 smart meters. There have been recalls in Arizona, Florida, in Oregon. Many hundreds of thousands of meters have been recalled because of the fire risk, and people have perished in these fires, and the utility industry is covering it up because to recall this massive deployment would mean a huge, potentially, fatal blow to their bottom line. So instead of, going the health and safety first, it's the same story. They put profit first, and people's health and our safety in our homes and our neighborhoods, and we're paying the price.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you use the word deploy because they use the word deploy, and it's very interesting to use a military term when talking about installing something like this on someone's home. That's just kind of a curious word, I always thought. In addition to the negative health effects, just as you say, people are facing higher and inaccurate bills. And you mentioned the host of smart meters catching on fire. They're hackable. They compromise our privacy. And they're soon to connect with our smart appliances, thus increasing the radiation factor as well as the privacy concern. And I'm really pleased that on your website, and I hope our listeners go to that, you have special pages for fire and safety issues, radio frequency radio issues, radiation issues, health issues, utility company issues, billing, privacy, legal issues. There's so many issues swirling around this that it blows one's mind that it would even have been deployed in the first place. And this obviously wasn't done to improve anybody's quality of life or to improve anything for that matter. I mean, when you're going to do this massive of a rollout and not even inform people, let alone get their consent. And then when they do raise a question, you call the Public Utilities Commission, they don't either know what they're talking about or lie to you and tell you that everything's safe when all you have to do is go out with a meter and measure and see the huge and vast amounts of radiation that are being pulsed, and people are feeling ill and getting sick, and it's a huge issue. I have people that always call and want to know the difference between the smart electric meters, gas meters, and water meters. Do you know of any differences in terms of health dangers?
There are many, many different types of smart meters. They function differently, though. The electric meters are really the one to be wary of because the electric meters have an unlimited supply of electricity with which to power their transmitters, whereas the water and gas meters tend to be run on batteries and so are limited. From what we've seen, the really, really dangerous types are the AMI meters, the advanced metering infrastructure. These are the ones that are two-way radios. They transmit constantly. They require a network of communications modules, collector meters, antenna mounted on streetlights. And so it's a much, much greater level of electrosmog generated by this system and much higher levels. Any transmitting meter, any digital meter has the potential of putting out levels of radiation that are dangerous to human health and to environmental health. Not just humans getting ill, it's pets, it's plants, beekeepers who are noticing that the bees die once the smart grid goes in. So this is a project that is being sold and rammed down the public's throat using environmental guilt as a form of coercion. We see these false solutions being proffered by industry that they say, it'll reduce carbon dioxide, it will improve your quality of life. But when you get right down to it, these are false solutions where smart meters actually increase carbon emissions. Compact fluorescent light bulbs are another one, but the reality is that they are toxic, mercury-filled light bulbs that put out dirty electricity, a form of radiation that can harm you. People have a right, constitutional and human right, to ensure that their own homes and their communities are safe. If you ask the utility whether you can opt out or whether you can have an analog, immediately that's putting yourself into a position where you've given up your power. And instead of asking them what your rights are, it's important to research them and to declare them and to put yourself in the driver's seat and allow the utility to respond rather than the other way around.
Yep. And that leads me right into my next question for you. What can we do in both situations? A, we don't have a smart meter installed yet and we don't want one. And B, we do have one installed and we want to get rid of it. What is our recourse?
Well, we just printed these new brochures which go into some detail about both of those situations. You can get those brochures from us at stopsmartmeters.org/store. Basically, there's two situations. If you still have your analog meter, this is your spinning disc meter, and you can go on our website, look at the frequently asked questions, and look at pictures to see whether you have one or not. If you still have your analog meter, it's important to defend it. If someone from the utility or a contractor comes to try and remove it, and it's outside your house, which most meters are, you have a right to tell that installer to get off of your property. And if they don't, they refuse, then they're trespassing, and you can call the police to report that. Just like anyone who's coming on your property, doing something that you're not comfortable with, doing something that may harm you, you have a right to tell them to get off your property immediately. So that's basic property rights, whether or not there's a quote-unquote opt-out in your area. The second thing to note is that it's much better to fight the smart meter before they're installed and as a community, not necessarily just as an individual. Where communities have been successful in creating smart meter free zones and keeping them out, it's a community effort. The community has talked about it, they've met about it, there's a consensus within the neighborhood that this is not something that they want. They're organized. You have retired people, you have people who work from home watching to make sure that the installer trucks don't come in, and if they do, they have a written statement that says they're authorized to tell them to get off your property if you don't happen to be present at the time. So people have caged their analog meters, they've built extensions and greenhouses on their homes to surround them and to defend them. It's important to tell the utility in writing they do not have permission to install any type of electronic or wireless meter on your home, and the best defense is to be there, to have someone there, and to tell them to get off the property. If you have a smart meter, we advise writing to the utility, giving them a deadline for removal, and if they don't comply with that deadline that you set, purchasing an analog meter online, they're about $15, $20, and hiring an electrician or someone who knows what they're doing to physically remove the unauthorized smart meter and replace it with a safe analog meter. And, in California, back in December of 2011, there were a group of families who were being injured by the radiation from the meters and who took off the meters themselves with an electrician and returned them to the utility the same day with the news media watching. And that can be very, very powerful. It can also put a lot of pressure on the utility to respond to these problems that people are raising.
Wow. These are all doable things, but you've got like elderly people that can't get around and they live on their own. This is a huge effort for somebody to have to make. And I've even read and seen YouTube videos of people doing and trying to defend their meter, but they still march on in and wire cutters and people getting arrested. So I think a lot of folks might be hesitant to stand in the face of what they think is the law, or the utility company's going to say, we own these meters. We have every right to work on them and make changes to them. And it scares people.
Yeah, absolutely. Just because they happen to be saying that they have legal rights to force these things on you doesn't mean that they actually do. Most of what's going on is utility company bluffing. Mm-hmm. In Naperville, Illinois, and some other places, you have a situation where utility companies are working hand in hand with the local police, and police are actually arresting people for standing there in front of the meter reader and saying you can't install this. Right. Which is absolutely, horrific, and really many people have looked at this and said, this is really fascism. When the government and the corporations are working hand in hand to undermine our basic rights. It's definitely scary, and it's one more reason why we can't just fight this alone individually. We have to talk to our neighbors. We have to reach out. We have to share films like Take Back Your Power, and locally in neighborhoods. It's one thing to disconnect or to arrest one person for resisting this. It's quite another to disconnect an entire neighborhood. Right. People are realizing, they could force anything on our property because we're so dependent on them. They could, bill us $100 a month, $1,000 a month for having a safe analog meter. Because we are dependent on them, we are vulnerable. If we continue to be dependent on these industries that have shown themselves to be really psychopathic, the most accurate word I can think of, then we're putting ourselves at risk of future projects that they dream up, that they don't consult us on, and that they deem it necessary to force on our homes.
You mentioned earlier, prior to our conversation on air, that you've been living without power?
Yep. PG&E is the largest utility in the country. Thousands of people have refused to pay the opt-out fees that have been put in place for people to keep their analog meters. This opt-out fee is still in dispute at the Utilities Commission, but that hasn't stopped the PG&E from threatening to disconnect people for not paying it. So about a year ago, we moved to a rural location in the northern Sierra Nevadas, and we moved in. I gave them a doctor's note saying that I am hypersensitive because I get headaches and nausea, other issues when I'm exposed to wireless. And I said, I can't have this on my home. Please remove it. Here's a letter from my doctor. They went ahead and removed it, and then a couple months later put in a opt-out fee of $15 a month, and we refused to pay that. And there are people in our community who are self-reading their analog meters because they live remotely, and in the winter it gets snowy here, and the utility doesn't want to drive up to the meters every month. So they're allowed to keep their analogs and self-read at no extra charge. So we're simply asking for that same treatment, but because we were spreading the truth about the meters and problems with the meters in the community, they decided to retaliate and disconnect us. And so it's been 6 months now. We've been living without electricity, and it's been quite a struggle.
I can imagine. Now, you're going to get a cold winter, yes?
Yeah, we live, 5,000 feet up in the Sierra Nevada, and last winter it got down to 20 below. Luckily we have a wood-burning stove. It's like we're living in the 19th century. All of a sudden we're heating up our water on the wood-burning stove and cooking on propane and, using LED rechargeable lights. But it's a struggle. It's definitely not been easy, but we're not going to be coerced. We're not just going to fold when the utility industry treats us like this, and we're going to continue to spread the word and look into possible renewable energy solutions.
And I want to just say I'm so impressed that you are one of the few people that actually walk the walk and talk the talk.
Well, thanks. It's not always easy, and my girlfriend is definitely not happy with me right now. because of this. I think she's going to break up with me soon.
Oh,
They don't get some refrigeration and hot running water. So that's kind of the number one task here is to get things to be livable before the winter hits.
Let's talk real quickly about how to measure radiation and how to potentially shield ourselves, our homes, and our surroundings. So if folks have a smart meter on their home, what are some of the things that they can do while they're fighting it? Meantime, though, every night they've got to go to bed and they've got this pulsating on their home.
Right.
We need folks to be able to measure this with a meter because you have no idea what it is and how strong it is or where it is. And then when you try to mitigate it with shielding, you may be making
stabbing in the dark, sort of.
you may be making the problem worse.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things to be aware of. One is that distance is your friend when it comes to reducing your RF exposure. So if you're sleeping in the room, right next to the smart meter, you definitely want to not do that. Sleep is when your body needs quiet. Both sound, light, and other forms of radiation like RF. It needs to be low. There's a ton of shielding options available that products have sprung up. The smart meter shield, they charge hundreds of dollars for it, and we really do not support those kinds of shielding products. We feel like it's a distraction, and it makes people think that they can't actually remove the meter. You have the authority to demand that the utility remove the smart meter from your house, period. And if people don't exercise that right, we're going to lose that right. So that's the most important thing is to eliminate the source. Well, I've seen people with a smart meter outside trying to shield it, and meanwhile inside they're still using cell phones and cordless phones and microwaves and compact fluorescent light bulbs and all these things that are emitting similar types of radiation. So go wired in your house. Use an Ethernet cable, use a corded landline, turn that cell phone off or ditch it completely if you don't need to use it. Microwave ovens are terribly leaky. And really the way to go out and assess your home is to either do a self-assessment and purchase, we sell on our website these Cornet ED78S electrosmog meters that measure microwaves from all this wireless junk and also power line radiation. We have those for sale for $150. Which is a competitive price, and it benefits our work to get the word out about smart meters that you can fit in your pocket. So in terms of shielding, you still have to worry about, next door neighbors' smart meters, the cordless phone, maybe they have a powerful Wi-Fi transmitter, and you can use one of these RF meters to gauge what kind of radiation is coming in and where is it coming from, how strong is it. And sometimes there are situations where shielding can help, but again, we always recommend to try and eliminate the source. Now, if you're living right next door to a cell tower, that's easier said than done, and that may be a location that you might want to reconsider spending most of your time because that's not a healthy. They've done studies that if you're within 0.6 of a mile of a major cell tower, that's not a healthy environment to live in. But knowledge really empowers you when you don't know what you're being exposed to and you don't know what the levels are, you don't know where it's coming from. It's hard to do anything about it. So you're really getting an RF meter and learning how to use it properly is the first step in reducing your exposure at home.
Right. I think everyone's going to be needing a meter one of these days real soon, right?
It's empowering. It definitely helps. People are shocked when they make a cell phone call and they hold this meter next to it. It goes up into the red, warning, very, very high levels. And people realize, oh my God, I'm holding this up to my head,
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about it like that, it really doesn't make sense. What we're told by Apple and the cell phone companies is not an accurate picture of reality. And I urge people to seek out independent evidence to make their own decisions about what's safe and what kind of technology they want to bring into their lives.
Wow. So much more to know about this topic. I'm so pleased to have you on the show today. So where can folks go to learn more about you, smart meters, and maybe purchase the Cornet meter that you were talking about?
Well, people can get more information on our website, which is stopsmartmeters.org. If people want to purchase stickers, brochures, or the public health warning cards, which have been very, very popular, they can do that through our store, which is stopsmartmeters.org. Click on the store link at the website. So if you want to organize a Stop Smart Meters group in your neighborhood, we are happy to help and provide materials. And so really encourage people to get active about this issue, find out when the deployment is happening in your neighborhood, and get out ahead of this and make sure that your neighbors know what's coming and know that they're right, because otherwise they'll just come in one day and deploy the whole neighborhood and steal your analog meters.
excellent, excellent advice. And your website is probably the gold standard of resources out there. There's just so much excellent information. And you were one of the earlier folks to hit the streets with this. And as I said, you're walking the walk and talking the talk. A lot of people talk about this, but to go 6 months without power and heading into a winter, I applaud you.
We'll see what happens.
Absolutely. Well, bless you. Josh, thank you so much for taking the time to help us learn how to manage this invasion of our privacy and our health. And please keep us posted on anything that we need to share in the future.
I will. Thank you so much for your coverage on this issue and keeping people up to date and informed, Pat.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure.